My name is Amos. I'm 30 years old, and I grew up in rooms that were never ours. In buildings my father was paid to keep and never once allowed to own. My father was a caretaker, which is a gentle word for the man who holds the keys to a place and none of the claim on it. He was the janitor for an apartment block in Racine, then the night man at a cannery, then the groundskeeper for a church camp up the lakeshore, and every one of those jobs came with a room, and every room came with the same 2 sentences. Keep it nice. And then when the work ran thin, we will need you out by the 1st. I learned to love a place the way you love a library book, with the due date always sitting in the back of your mind. We moved 9 times before I turned 15. My father was not a bad man, only a man whose name was never on the deeds, doing careful work for people whose names were. The lesson went into me deeper than anybody meant to teach it. You do not get to keep things. You keep them nice for the people who do, and then you hand back the keys and you go. So I built a grown man's whole life out of that one belief. I did not buy anything. I rented by the month and kept a bag half packed out of a habit I never once examined. I did not put my name to anything that lasted longer than a year. I owned a decent set of hands and a truck that mostly started, and I called that wisdom. A man who owns nothing can lose nothing. For 10 years, the only thing I let myself love was other people's work, because a thing that is already spoken for can never turn into yours to lose. Then a retiring old man tried to hand me the one thing I had spent my whole life refusing to want, and a woman I had called my closest friend for 6 years set down her pen and told me the only way to keep it was to do the one thing I had never done, which was put my name on something and mean it. Between them, they quietly took apart the only rule I had ever managed to live by. I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell it the way it happened. My best friend offered to marry me on paper so that I could buy the creamery where we both worked. And the season that followed changed everything I believed about myself and about what a man like me is allowed to keep. I know how that sounds. Stay with me because it did not go the way you are picturing, and the thing that saved us in the end was not the marriage, and it was not the money. It was a cracked copper kettle older than anyone alive, a stubborn old coppersmith, and the slow discovery that the distance between keeping a thing and owning it was never as wide as I had spent 30 years believing. Let me back up to the milk. Juniper Bluff Creamery sat far out on the Door County Peninsula, up where the land narrows to a wrist and the lake wraps around you on 2 sides, and the October light turns the color of good butter. It had stood on that bluff for 90 years. Haver Nyholm's parents built it, Anders and Merritt, 2 immigrants who came across the ocean with a hammered copper kettle, lashed in a crate and a craft they were not going to let the new country take from them. Haver had spent his whole long life on that bluff, first as their boy, then as their partner at the kettle, and for 40 years after they passed as the keeper of everything they left behind. Here is the thing this whole story turns on. The taste of Juniper Bluff did not come out of a book. It came out of the tools. Anders had hammered that copper kettle by hand in the old country, a great round basin gone the color of an old penny. And copper does something to milk that steel never learned, and the curve he had beaten into it was the curve that made the cheese taste the way it tasted, and no other way. Beside it stood the molds, and the press he had carved out of hard maple, worn satin smooth by 90 years of hands and curd and whey. And struck into the rim of the kettle, near the handle where a right hand comes to rest, were 2 small letters and then 2 more. A.N. Anders Nyholm, and beside them M.N. Merritt. He had punched their initials into the copper the week they opened, the way you scratch your name into wet cement, a plain, flat declaration that this thing was theirs and they were staying. Haver used to lay his palm over those letters without noticing he was doing it, the way you touch a doorframe on your way through a house you grew up in. I did it too in time. A place teaches your hands long before it teaches your head. Haver's wife, Solveig, had worked that make room beside him for most of their marriage, and she had been gone 4 years by the time this story starts, and he still set 2 mugs on the shelf some mornings out of habit and quietly put one back. He was a widower who talked to his tools more than to people. He had no children, and that kettle with his parents' names on it was the nearest thing left to his own blood. He tended it the way other men tend a family plot, except it was the opposite of a grave. It was the part of everyone he had loved that had refused to stop working. I came up to Cedar Landing at 20 with a duffel bag, a hard year behind me, and my father's habit of never unpacking writing in my chest. Haver hired me to wash kettles and haul milk cans. I meant to stay a season. I stayed 10 years, and I think it is because Haver never once asked me to promise him anything. He just handed me the next task, and then the one after that, and a place that only ever asks you for the day in front of you is a place a man like me can breathe in. He taught the way old craftsmen teach, which is to say he barely spoke, never praised, and when I got a thing wrong he would only look at it, and the looking was worse than any lecture. I learned to read curd with my fingertips, and that patience is a flavor you can taste in a finished wheel. And near the end of my 2nd year, on a morning I will hold onto until I die, he stood me at the copper kettle and let me run the make alone from milk to mold for the first time. My hands were not steady. He put my palm flat on his father's initials and said, "Anders' hands were here. Then mine. Now yours. Do the work like all 3 pairs are on it." I did. Whatever else in my life was coming loose, when I stood at that kettle, I did the work like 3 pairs of hands were on it, and for the first time I was somewhere I did not keep half-packed. And I learned Edda. Edda came to the Creamery 2 years after I did. She ran the front of the shop and kept the books and could sell a wheel of 2-year cheddar to a man who had wandered in for directions to the ferry. She had a laugh that started low and climbed, and a way of catching a mistake in the ledger without ever making you feel small about it. We were opposite in every surface way, and yet she was restless in the exact shape I was restless, and that is what made me trust her before I trusted anyone. She always said she was only passing through, and she said it for 6 years while she repainted the shop front twice, learned every regular by name, and cried into a paper napkin the afternoon our aged cheddar took a blue ribbon at the county fair. Somewhere across those 6 years, she became the person I told things to. Just the small running talk of 2 people who share a building and a purpose and a coffee pot. She knew I took my coffee scalding. I knew she hummed under her breath when she was worried about money. We locked up that shop together 1,000 nights. If you had asked me back then, I would have called her my best friend, plainly, the way you report the weather, and I would not have heard the sighs of what I was admitting. One memory holds all the rest. My 4th winter, her old sedan died in the shop lot in a hard January cold snap, and she would not hear of anybody driving her the 40 minutes home, because taking a ride was the kind of debt she did not allow herself. So I got up before the light, walked down in the dark, and had the engine turning over and the cab warm by the time she came out with her travel mug, and said I had needed to move the thing anyway. She did not thank me, because that would have meant admitting she had needed something from somebody. She only looked at the warm running car and said, "You are going to make some woman very confused one day, Amos." Then she drove to work 40 minutes behind my taillights. That was us. 2 people who kept showing up for each other and calling it nothing, because nothing was safe, and something had a price we had each decided, long before we met, that we could not pay. Then came the wet March morning. Haver called the two of us into the make room and shut the kettle down cold in the middle of a make. He never stopped a make. My stomach dropped before he got a word out. He stood there in his rubber boots, 78 years old, his big hands gone stiff and no longer entirely his to command, and told us plainly. His hands were failing. He had let a full hoop slip the week before and nearly gone to the floor with it. The doctor in Sturgeon Bay had used the word he could not stand, which was retire. He was not going to do what his own parents had done, which was hold the place in a white-knuckle grip until they died and leave it to sort itself out over their bodies. He was going to hand it on while he was still above ground to watch it kept, to sit on his porch and see the smoke lift off the make room chimney, and know a wheel had been pressed that day by hands he had chosen. That was the whole of what he wanted from whatever years he had left. Then he told us the hard part. He could not simply give the place to me. He was not a wealthy man, and that bluff was every dollar he had saved against being old. There was already a buyer at the table, offering more than the place was worth. A company called Brightland Dairy Group, an outfit down in the Fox Valley that had spent a decade buying up small heritage labels across the Midwest, keeping the pretty old names printed on the paper, and quietly moving the making to a single plant 3 states away. Their plan for Juniper Bluff, their man had told Haver to his face, was to license the name, close the make room, sell off the old copper for its scrap weight, and print a picture of the bluff on a wrapper stuffed with cheese made 1,000 miles from it. Keep the name. Melt the kettle. Haver had a word for that. He called it stuffing and mounting. Keep the hide on the wall. Throw away the animal. He wanted to sell to me. But wanting a thing and paying for it are 2 different animals, and I did not have the money. The working land on that part of the peninsula was watched over by an old outfit called the Peninsula Heritage Farmland Trust, set up in the 1940s by families who did not want the next hard times selling the whole shoreline off to men who had never smelled a barn. The trust ran a low-interest fund called the Keeper's Loan, meant to put a failing heritage farmstead into the hands of a next keeper instead of a developer, and it was the one instrument on earth that could put Juniper Bluff in my name. But the covenant had been written in 1946 and never modernized, and it would only lend to what it called a resident-keeping household. A married couple, 2 names on the note, living on the land, bound to the place and to each other. The people who wrote it believed a farmstead lives or dies on a household, and that a lone man will run at the first killing winter and leave the land to the bank. I sat in that make room and felt a door I had never even tried to open swing shut in my face. I was 30 and single and the caretaker's son, exactly the man that covenant had been written to keep off the land, and everyone knew it, Haver most of all, who looked at me with something close to an apology, because he had already run the same arithmetic and hit the same wall. I did not sleep that week. Even with the Keeper's Loan, I needed a second name on the note, a spouse, a household, and I did not have one, because I had spent 10 years making certain I never would. I had made myself lose-proof by making myself own nothing, and now, the one thing I had ended up loving anyway was going to be sold to men who would cut up Anders' kettle for scrap, and I could not lift a finger to stop it. I told Etta all of it on a Thursday night, closing up, the 2 of us wiping down the same steel table from opposite ends, the way we had 1,000 times. I told her about my father and the 9 houses, and the keys always handed back. I told her the thing I had never said out loud, that I was afraid to want the Creamery, that wanting to keep a place was the first move in a game I had watched my father lose over and over, and that the safest I had ever felt was the feeling of the thing not being mine. And now it was going to be taken anyway, and I did not even have the comfort of having refused it. She was quiet a long while. She set down her rag, and she said it as plainly as she said everything. She said, "Then marry me." I laughed, sure she was being kind in that reckless way she had. She did not laugh with me. She came around the table so I could not turn it into a joke and said it again, slower. On paper. A partnership. The covenant wants 2 married names living on the land, so we handed 2 married names. She had savings I had not known about, quiet money set by over 6 careful years, and with her name and her credit next to mine, we would clear the trust's bar, qualify for the keeper's loan, and buy Juniper Bluff out from under Brightland before their check ever cleared. And when it was all safe, we could quietly undo the legal part and go back to being friends who ran a creamery, no harm done. She said she loved that place too. She said it was the first spot on the whole map where she had ever stopped looking at the door. And she was not going to stand in that shop and watch a company from the Fox Valley haul Anders' kettle off on a scrap truck just because I was too frightened and too proud to sign my name next to the person I trusted more than anyone alive. I said no. I said it 3 times. I could not tie her savings and her good name to my sinking boat. I could not ask her to wear a ring for a legal fiction and let the county whisper about it. She heard me out. Then she said the thing that cut my legs clean out from under me. She said, "Amos, you have spent 30 years believing you do not get to keep anything. You have stood at that kettle every working day for 10 years and made it yours with your hands and never once let yourself say the word. You are the last man in Wisconsin who would hand back these keys. The only person alive who cannot see that is you. So let me put my name next to yours until you can see it." Borrow my eyes. We signed at the courthouse 9 days later. The courthouse in Sturgeon Bay smelled of floor wax and old paper and radiator heat. Marta from the shop stood up as one witness in her good church coat, and Denny, our one hired hand, as the other, turning his cap in his hands like he could not decide whether he was at a wedding or a closing. In the truck we had gone over the terms the way 2 partners go over a lease. Separate rooms, separate lives, a partnership on paper to keep a place alive, and when the danger was gone, we would undo it clean. I slid a plain band onto her finger and my hand was not as steady as hers, and when the clerk read the sentence that made it law, Etta looked up at me, and for 1 second before she folded it back into a joke, there was a thing in her face I did not have a name for. I told myself it was relief. That spring, I told myself a great many things. The trust approved the keeper's loan in April. Haver sold us Juniper Bluff for a number that made his own lawyer object out loud, and Haver told the lawyer to mind his own business. At the closing, he did not slide the deed across first. He got up, carried the copper kettle in from the make room, and set it down in the middle of the table among all the papers, penny bright, the 4 struck letters catching the light. Then he laid one heavy hand flat over his father's initials, the way I had watched him do 1,000 times. He did not make a speech. Haver never made a speech in his life. He said, "Nobody has ever owned this cattle. Not my father who beat it out of a copper sheet, not my mother, not me. We only ever kept it warm and handed it on still warm. Today it is your turn to keep it. And someday, God willing, you will be old, and it will be your turn to hand it to somebody with better hands and let it go." Then he pushed the deed across, and it was ours, and I understood he had just handed me the heaviest and most alive thing I would ever be asked to carry. Then the season turned, and the paper we had signed began, very slowly and without either of us admitting it, to turn into something with a pulse. Nobody tells you that keeping a thing is not one grand gesture. It is 10,000 small ones, done tired, done together, Done again the next morning, whether you have it in you or not. Etta and I ran Juniper Bluff through that first summer on our 4 hands, and Denny's too, and Marta on Saturdays, and it very nearly broke us. We were up before the birds and awake past midnight over the ledgers, learning how narrow the ledge was, how a single ruined make could hand Brightland the opening they were still waiting for. Because Brightland had not gone anywhere. Their man, a smooth and unhurried fellow named Vance Corley, kept finding reasons to drive up the peninsula, buying a coffee in Fish Creek and mentioning, gently, that their offer would still be there if the loan ever felt heavy. He had the patience of a man who had watched 100 small places go under and knew the arithmetic sat on his side of the table. To satisfy the covenant and to save the gas of 2 households, Etta moved into the old cottage that came with the land. It had 2 bedrooms. We kept to our terms, but there is no term written by 2 careful people that survives a shared kitchen at 6 in the morning. I learned that she read 3 pages of a novel every night, no matter how far past empty she was, because it was proof the day had held something that was only hers. She learned that I could not sleep until I had gone down and looked in on the make room one last time. One night she followed me down and watched me run a cloth around the inside of the copper, and after a while she said, 90 years. And now it is your 2 hands on it. She said it like she was proud, and I had to bend over the kettle so she would not catch my face, because no one had ever once been proud of my hands. Grateful for them, yes. Never proud. It was Haver who put the thing in front of us that could save the year. He had taken the small room at the end of the cottage, and he came down every morning with his coffee, and though his hands could no longer be trusted with a full hoop, his eyes could still catch a fault in mine before I felt it. He told us about the Chicago order. There was an old family market in the city called Fenwick's, the kind of place where a good manger's word could carry a small creamery for a year, and their head buyer, an old friend of Haver's named Roy, put in 1 large standing order every autumn for the holiday tables. 1 filled order from Fenwick's was money enough to make our first loan payment, prove to the trust we were a going concern and not a romantic gamble, and put a real floor under the whole tottering thing. Roy had bought from Haver for 30 years. He agreed, on Haver's name alone, to give the new owners 1 shot. 1 order, due the first week of October, made the old way in the old kettle. Fill it clean and on time, and Juniper Bluff would have both feet on the ground. Miss it, and Corley would still be in the coffee shop, waiting. There were good days, too. Saturday mornings, we drove the wheels down to the market in Fish Creek, where Etta could turn a folding table into the best-loved stall on the green. Our regulars knew, the way a small town knows everything, that Brightland was circling, and they started buying a little more than they needed, the way you carry a pot of soup to a house where someone is sick. An old fisherman named Ivar bought a whole wheel one Saturday, and admitted in the same breath that he could not eat that much cheese in a year. He only wanted us to have a good day in the books. By late summer, we had found a rhythm that felt, when I let myself notice it, dangerously close to a life. We made cheese in the cool of the early morning and ate supper on the cottage steps in the long, slow northern evenings. Haver in the 3rd chair telling stories he had never told me in 10 years of working shoulder to shoulder. Some nights I caught myself wishing the day were longer, and I did not ask why, because a careful man can hold a good thing a long time if he simply refuses to name it. I want to tell you about the last week of September, because that was the week I lost the thing that could not be lost, and then found out what I was actually made of. The Chicago order was due the first week of October, which meant the whole of it had to be made in the last week of September, in a run of long make days back to back. We had the milk contracted, the mold scrubbed, Denny lined up for the heavy lifting, Roy's list pinned to the wall. On the second morning of that run, with the kettle full and the milk brought up to heat and the first curd just beginning to set, I heard a sound come out of the copper I had never heard in 10 years. A low, wrong, tearing groan, felt in the floor more than heard. And then the smell of scald, and a wide, bright wash of hot whey spreading fast across the floor toward my boots. The kettle had split. An old seam low on the side, where Anders himself must have joined 2 hammered sheets 70 years before, had let go all at once under the heat, and a full make of milk and half-set curd was pouring out of a copper wound the length of my hand, ruined, gone. I killed the heat and stood in 3 inches of steaming whey and looked at that split, at the 2 little letters just above it gone dull with the mess, and the floor went out from under me worse than the day Haver shut the make down, because this was not a business. This was the object itself, the one physical thing on earth that made Juniper Bluff what it was, the thing with the founder's name struck into it, and it had broken open in my hands, on my watch, 4 days before the order that would decide whether any of us kept the bluff at all. You cannot make Juniper Bluff cheese in a stainless vat from a catalog. The copper is the cheese, and the copper was lying open on the bench. I do not know how long I stood in the mess. I know Etta found me. I could barely get the words out, that the kettle was finished and the order was dead and the loan behind it, that I had held the most important thing anyone had trusted me with and let it break. And Etta, who had spent 6 years watching me flinch from everything I might lose, did not comfort me and did not tell me I was wrong. She looked at the split a long moment. Then she said, "Copper does not die, Amos. Copper is the one thing in this whole place that can be made whole again. Go find me the man who knows how." And something in the flat certainty of it got my feet back under me. Here is where Brightland made its cleanest move. Corley heard about the kettle inside a day, and he did not gloat. He drove up the next morning with 2 coffees and an offer that was almost kind, and that is what made it dangerous. He was so sorry about the kettle. Terrible luck. But Brightland had a modern-make room down in the Fox Valley sitting half empty, food grade and inspected, and he would be glad, no strings, to let us run the Chicago order down there so we did not lose Roy and default on the note. Just to help. Neighbors helping neighbors, he said, and smiled, and I understood exactly what I was looking at. If one wheel of Juniper Bluff was ever made inside a Brightland building on Brightland steel, the making had already moved to the Fox Valley, and the name would follow the making inside a year, and the kettle would go for scrap whether it was cracked or not. I told him no before the coffee was cool. He set the cup down unbothered, said the offer would keep, and drove back down the peninsula to wait, because waiting had never once failed him. So I went to find the man who knew how. Haver knew him. Of course Haver knew him. There was a retired coppersmith named Ludwig, over 80, living alone down toward Algoma, who had apprenticed as a boy on ship boilers and stills, and who had, 40 years back, put the last repair into that very kettle. He was the only man left within 300 miles who could reopen an old seam and beat, and braze it closed again so that it would hold heat and hold true to the curve Anders had hammered into it. I drove down that afternoon, with the kettle wrapped in moving blankets in the bed of my truck, like a hurt animal. Ludwig was a small, fierce old man with hands like knotted rope, and a shop that smelled of flux and coal, and 70 years of work. He ran one thumb along the split without a word, and along the old seam above it, and grunted and said Anders had done honest work and the metal was tired, not dead, and tired metal can be brought back if you are patient and do not rush the heat. Then he told me the truth of it. It would take the better part of 3 days to do right, and it could not be hurried, because copper that is rushed will only tear again the first hot make, and then it is finished for good. 3 days. The order shipped in 4. I could have left the kettle and prayed. I did not. I called Etta to hold the market and mind Haver, and I stayed. For 3 days, I did what a caretaker's son knows best, which is make himself useful to a craft that is not his own. I worked the bellows to bring his fire up slow and even. I held the heavy copper steady on the anvil while he cut away the tired seam and set in a new spline. I turned the kettle a quarter at a time under his mallet through hours of him, tapping the new joint down flush, feeling the metal with his palm between every course of blows the way I feel curd with my fingers. When he spoke, it was to tell me things I would never have known, that Anders had signed the inside of the base too, a small oppressed low where no buyer would ever see it, a maker's mark for no one but himself. On the third night near midnight, Ludwig ran a wet rag around the cooled repair, tapped it once to hear the note come back true and said, "There. She will outlive you now, if you do not sell her for scrap." I drove home through the dark with the mended kettle beside me on the seat, one hand on the cool copper at every stop sign, the way you keep a hand on a sleeping child. We made the Chicago order in 2 brutal days, Etta and Denny and me, and even Haver on his stool calling the curd, the mended copper holding the heat true as the day Anders beat it round. The seam held. The cheese set clean and smelled the way 90 years of juniper bluff had always smelled. We loaded Roy's wheels onto the refrigerated truck on the first morning of October with an hour to spare, and I stood in the yard and watched it take the whole of our future down the peninsular road, and I did not feel like a man who had handed back the keys. For the first time in my life, I felt like a man who had kept them. After that week, the terms we had recited in the truck quietly stopped meaning anything. We never had a conversation about it. We did not need to. Etta stopped going back down the hall to the far bedroom, and I stopped pretending I wanted her to, and the cottage turned into a home the plain, unremarkable way homes get made, one shared morning at a time. There was no ceremony, no second courthouse, no aisle. There was only a man who had spent his life braced to be the one who hands the keys back, waking up slowly to the fact that he had already stayed, that the staying had happened years ago without his permission, in 10,000 mornings at a copper kettle and 1,000 nights locking up a shop beside the same person. The paper had called us married since spring. Somewhere in that bright, cold October, with no witnesses and no rings beyond the plain courthouse band, it simply became true. I told her one night on the cottage steps that I was done keeping a bag half-packed. She had been waiting 6 years for me to notice. I had already unpacked it. I kissed her once, quiet on the cold steps with Haver's window dark above us, and neither of us pretended afterward that it was the season talking. Roy called from Chicago the second week of October. The wheels had sold through the Fenwick's counter in 4 days, and he wanted double for the spring. And he told Etta on the phone that Haver Nyholm had never in 30 years sent him a bad wheel, and the new people had not broken the streak. That one order, filled clean and on time in the mended kettle, was the thing that did it. The trust steward, a sharp and kind woman named Ruth Dahl, drove out, walked the make room, read the invoice and the ledger, watched me run a make in the copper, and certified us a going concern. The keeper's loan settled onto solid ground. The purchase was final and past the deadline that had loomed over the whole spring, and there was nothing left for Brightland to wait out. Corley sent one last note, polite to the end, and I put it in the wood stove and warmed my hands on it, which I admit was the least gracious thing I did all year and have never once regretted. Haver did not die that winter, and I say that plainly because I spent a good part of the season braced for it the way I brace for every loss. He did not die. He got smaller and slower and more himself. He moved his stool closer to the wood stove and directed more than he lifted, taught Etta to read a curd until she could catch a fault as fast as I could, and sat on the porch in the evenings watching the smoke come off the make-room chimney, telling me more than once that it was the only thing he had ever really wanted to see. He is on that porch as I tell you this. He is godfather now to a small, loud person who has his stubbornness and Etta's laugh, and who is going to grow up, I have decided, in one house, with her name on the deed, and never once learn what it is to watch a moving truck come. That was 4 years ago now. Last spring, Haver came down to the make room carrying the old steel letter punches from the drawer, the same ones Anders had used to strike his name into the copper the week they opened. He set them on the bench next to the kettle without a word, which was Haver for get on with it. And with his stiff old hands guiding mine, in the space of rim just past them, in, where a right hand comes to rest, I struck 4 new letters into the copper. My initials and then Etta's. Not to say we owned it. Haver had cured me of that word at the closing table. We struck them there to say that we had kept it, that we had caught it falling and made it whole and handed our whole lives across the counter for it, and that when our turn came, we would pass it on still warm to a pair of better hands. My name is on that kettle now, punched into metal that will outlast me, the boy who was never once allowed his name on any door. I lay my palm over all 6 sets of letters some mornings without noticing. A place teaches your hands, and then, if you are very lucky and very stubborn, it lets you leave your own mark where the last keeper left theirs. I spent 30 years believing that keeping a thing and owning it were opposites, that the only safe way to love a place was to hold it lightly enough to hand it back before it could be taken. I had it exactly backward. You do not keep a thing by refusing to hold it. You keep it by putting your name on it, right there beside the names of everyone who kept it before you, and then you stay, and you do the work every single day like every pair of hands that ever loved it is still on it beside yours. I know that now. It only took a cracked kettle, a stubborn old man, and my best friend setting down her pen to teach me. Would you have married your closest friend to keep the doors open?